talk to anyone, everyone so serve to change lives, 'cause lives can be changed forever. Serve to change lives whenever we're working together. Talk to someone right now. Start now and wow. When the right time arrives, you'll see you've changed lives. So serve to change lives, 'cause lives can be changed forever. Whenever we're working together, talk to someone right now. Start now and wow. When the right time arrives, you'll see you've changed lives. So serve to change your life.
Good evening, Rotarians and guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dasun. I'm the Emcee for tonight's evening meeting. First, we would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and also we pay respects to elders past, present, future, and extend our respect to all Indigenous Australian present today. Please note that most of your microphones has been muted for the duration of the presentation. Comments and questions can be posted into your chat window, and you can do that throughout the session. It's my great pleasure today to welcome you all for the 32nd meeting of the Rotary year and our monthly evening meeting. It's my honor today. I think we almost everyone got to meet him before the meeting. It's my honor to welcome our guest speaker, Jim Rogers, who's an investment expert as well as an author all the way from Singapore. Welcome, Jim. And Yi Dangzi will be introducing our guest speaker in a short while. In the meantime, please make them both welcome. A reminder to our club evening meetings are organized by a group of members, and we also plan to have the evening meetings every second Wednesday of the month. And a new year, we hope to plan a hybrid format. And if you guys have any suggestions about on speakers, guest speakers that we can have, please reach out to us, and we would like to have some suggestions from you all. And now I'd like to pass it on to Chair of the Day, Yidan, to introduce our guest speaker. Yidan, off to you.
It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Jim Rogers. Jim is an American investor and a financial commentator based in Singapore. He is the chairman of Beeland Interest Incorporated, the co-founder of Quantum Fund, as well as the creator of Rogers International Commodities Index. Jim was born in Alabama in America. He has been frequently featured in Time, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, etc., and many other media outlets. But apart from being a very successful investor, Jim is also an adventurer. He retired at the age of 37 and completed a number of amazing journeys after that. I believe Jim will be sharing the stories in a second as well. Jim is also an author with a number of very best-selling books, such as The Hot Commodities, Street Smart, A Gift to My Children, etc. Tonight, Jim will be speaking on investing and creating businesses in post-pandemic world to share how he sees the world today and what he's doing about it. Please post your questions in our chat box anytime, and there will be a Q&A session after the speech. Now I will pass it to our guest speaker tonight, Jim Rogers. Please give our guest a warm welcome.
Thank you, Yidan. Thank you very, very much. I will say to you all that what she didn't say. I grew up in a very small town in the backwoods of Alabama, but where both my grandfather and my grandfather in a different town, and my father were both presidents of the Rotary Club. I have great memories of the Rotary Club since I was very young and very small, and things that my family has done with Rotary. So I am a fan, and I'm nostalgic about what my memories of the Rotary Club. So when Yidan invited me, I certainly thought, well, she's a wonderful woman, but I thought also of my family and our heritage with the Rotary Club. So I drink to all of you and keep up the good work. What I want to talk about a little bit is what's going on in the world. And then I really want to take questions from you, because what you want to talk about is certainly much more important than what I want to talk about. I can talk about many, many things. As you can see in this map, a few years ago, my then fiance, she's now my wife, Paige Parker, and I spent 3 years driving around the world. I had gone around the world once before. What's going there? I'd gone around the world once before on a motorcycle. I got in the Guinness Book of Records for that, and for my second trip too. For what it's worth, I'm in the Guinness Book of Records 3 times, but the Guinness Book of Records does not pay your rent, I assure you. My mother thought it was great, but that's about as far as it goes. Anyway, on the second trip, we started in Iceland. We drove through Europe, Turkey, China, Korea, Japan, back into Siberia and Mongolia, across Russia, all around Europe, 32 countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, Australia, all around Australia, as you can see, New Zealand, then off to the bottom of South America. The bottom of South America, up Central America, up to Alaska, and then back down to the southern part of the US and back to New York. That was 3 years on the road. It was 245,000 kilometers. So it was a great adventure. And I remember every minute of it, loved it. What I want to do now is I want to show you a short video of what it's like. I can only show you 2 minutes. I cannot show you 5 years of driving around the world in 2 years. But the reason I want to show it to you is because there was a survey recently that showed that the number one dream of people in the world, not everybody obviously, but the number one dream is to get in your car and drive around the world. So I hope that all of you someday, if you want, if it's your dream, you too will head off around the world. It starts in Iceland with us toasting each other, wondering if we're going to make it alive. Yidan, can you start?
You've ever had.
Patience and calm.
In Iceland, off to the Great Wall. We did get married on the trip. Here we are cutting our cake. And this is our honeymoon. One of many camels we ran into. We went through several war zones. These guys were not very friendly at first, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you will see a familiar face. One of many markets. This is one of many bad roads that we drove. This is a sad time. We went to an AIDS orphanage down in South Africa. We went to see King Tut in Egypt. Whenever we could, we stopped at schools because I'm very keen on education. Everybody wanted their pictures made. This is Myanmar, which used to be called Burma. This is one of many roadside stands where we ate and drank. Iguazu Falls in South America. Now, this is the bane of my existence. This is bureaucracy, red tape, regulations. They're everywhere. This, on the other hand, is the black market. This is a much higher class of people. And when we got back to the U.S., we kept going.
Keep on going.
We headed up to Alaska in the dead of winter. And when we got back to New York, our first stop was the World Trade Center. That had been blown up while we were gone. That was 3 years on the road, 245,000 kilometers. So when we got home, we were a little bit tired. We thought we'd rest for a while. Well, one result of resting for a while is we now have a baby girl. Can you show the next slide, please, Don? Yes, we now have a baby girl. And I want to show you this because I had never wanted children in my whole life. I thought children were a horrible waste of time, money, energy. I felt so sorry for my friends who had children. I was never going to ruin my life like that. Well, I show you this because I was totally wrong. I was 100% wrong about children. This has been a fabulous experience for me. So I hope that all of you will go home for lunch one day or take a day off, whatever you need to do, because children are fabulous. And I will show you that I went home one day for lunch. Can we have the next slide, please? I went home for lunch one day, and as you can see, we had another one. I'm taking my own advice. I'm not just talking. You can also see that it's a girl. I grew up the oldest of 5 sons, and I know a lot of people like boys, but let me tell you, girls are much, much better. So when you go home for lunch, be sure to have girls because they're better. Now, let's go to the world, because the world and what's happening these days, pretty complicated for all of us. As you know, a few years ago, we had a horrible economic problem, which made many people go bankrupt. But then the central bank in America, the Federal Reserve it's called, decided that the solution was to print a lot of money. So the US Federal Reserve, the US Central Bank, printed gigantic amounts of money. They drove interest rates to the lowest in American history. American interest rates have never been this low. And partly as a consequence, interest rates throughout the world have never been this low in world history. And they continue. Nearly all central banks have continued printing a lot of money since. As you all know, it caused stock markets to go up. The world had a wonderful time, had a wonderful time in the financial markets. You know, the Japanese were printing huge amounts. Everybody was printing huge amounts of money. The Japanese central bank said, we will print, and his word was unlimited amounts of money, and they're all doing it. So naturally, with that kind of system around the world, with nearly all central banks, we've had very, very low interest rates, the likes of which we've never seen in history. One result of all of this has been that the US dollar has been fairly strong in the last little while, because many people are worried about other currencies, as they should be, and they think that the US dollar is a sound currency. I am an American. I will tell you that the US dollar is not a sound. Well, first of all, I'll tell you I own a lot of US dollars. Then I will tell you it is not a sound currency. The United States is the largest debtor nation in world history, and the debts are getting higher every single day. You probably will now ask, well, why do you own US dollars? And I own US dollars because in time of turmoil, people always look for a safe haven. And many people, for historic reasons, think the US dollar is a safe haven. My plan is that as the turmoil gets worse later this year or next, and the US dollar goes higher, I hope I'm smart enough to sell my US dollars. They will probably get overpriced. They may even turn into a bubble. And I'll have to sell because the US cannot go on much longer as the world's reserve currency, especially after what America has done to Russia recently. So many people are now looking for something to compete with the US dollar, including me. I'm looking for something to compete with the dollar too. So I hope that I'm smart enough to sell my US dollars when they get overpriced, Where I put the money, I have no idea at the moment. Well, I have a few ideas, but who knows? But then I will have to sell my US dollars, sell out of financial markets, because the next time we have a bear market, it's going to be the worst in my lifetime. And I can see that I'm older than most of you, so it's going to be the worst in your lifetime too. As you remember, in 2008, there was a horrible problem because of too much debt. Since then, since 2008, the debt everywhere has skyrocketed. The Japanese, even China has a lot of debt now. In 2008, China had a lot of money saved for a rainy day. It started raining, and so the Chinese started printing and spending a lot of money and helped save the world. But even China has a lot of debt. So I don't know who's going to bail us out next time. Maybe North Korea. North Korea doesn't have much debt. Of course, North Korea doesn't have much money either. But there is going to be a serious problem. The next bear market will be the worst in my lifetime because the debt is so unbelievably high all over the world. And to repeat, it has never been this high in world history. No international currency, no reserve currency or international medium of exchange has lasted more than 100 years or so. Before the US dollar, it was the British pound, as you all would know, because you're in Australia. But nothing has lasted that long. The US has been on top, currency has been on top for a while now. So it's coming to an end. And all of us will have to find something that's going to replace the US dollar as we go forward. And that will have a huge effect on stock markets, investment markets, all around the world. As I look around the world, I said, I don't have any shorts. I have not sold anything short yet. But as I look around the world, I see that bonds are certainly in a bubble. Bonds have never been this expensive in world history, everywhere in the world. Property in many places is becoming a bubble. If you go to Korea or New Zealand or many places, you know that property is a bubble in many places around the world. Stocks have been forming a bubble. Things like Amazon and Tencent go up every day. Not all stocks yet, which is one reason I haven't sold out, because there's still the possibility of a serious bubble before this is over. The only thing that I know, asset class that I know that's not a bubble, are commodities. I mean, silver is down 50% from its all-time high. You know, sugar is down 60% from its all-time high. You all live in a commodity country, an economy which has a large commodity base, so it certainly would be good for you. But the cheapest asset class I know around the world are commodities now. So I have been buying on more commodities for a couple of years. In the next correction, I'm sure I will buy more commodities still, because in the stock market, certainly not the bond market, but in the stock markets, I expect when there's peace, if there's peace in Ukraine, there'll be a big rally, huge rally in investment markets around the world. It might turn into a big blow off. And if it turns into a blow off, I hope I'm smart enough to sell and start selling short. But I don't plan to sell my commodities because of central banks all over the world printing so much money, such huge amounts of money. I'm sure we're going to have a continued bull market in commodities for a long time. You know, I lived through the 70s. I saw what happened to commodities back in those days when everybody was printing money. Well, the printing of money now is much, much, much greater than it was in the 70s. So we're going to, I anyway, own a lot of real assets and hope to buy more. So Yidai, can you put it back to the map and I will take questions? There, thank you. Basically, that's my view of the world now. I want to take questions because I want to hear what you want to talk about, but I will take questions about anything you want to talk about. We can talk about honeymoon spots or how to make money, how to lose money. I've certainly lost plenty of money in my day. So anything you want to talk about, let's have at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And yeah, quite riveting in terms of your views and well done, I guess, in explaining your whole venture across the world and the age of of your younger years. Jim, I want to bring you back to 1929, Great Depression, Black Monday, 1987, when I was born, 2001.com, 2008, as you did mention before, in the financial crisis, and most recently, one of the biggest pandemics that we've ever seen before in 2020. Right here, right now, where do you think that next date's going to come? Is that something that you might want to, cast your eye on, or give us your views as to where you see that next pop coming?
When you said the next what is coming, the next
the next bubble. So the next great date. Sorry about the doom and gloom, but I'd love to hear.
No,
here tonight.
thanks.
Yeah.
No, Stephen, one of the things we all have to learn is that we need to be prepared, because there will be more periods of trauma, whether we like it or not. Some politicians will say, don't worry, we've solved all the world's problems. We're not going to have any more recessions or bear markets. Please don't listen to them. Please do not listen to them, because history shows we've always had problems, economic problems and others. So we're certainly going to have more. And we all need to think about it and prepare ourselves in case. I would suspect, as I said, what I suspect, this thing in Ukraine will calm down before too much longer. And then we'll have a huge rally, because we will all have a sigh of relief. The central banks will not be so aggressive at raising money, raising interest rates. They should maybe, but they won't. And so we'll all have a big last rally. So I would suspect, Stephen, that by later this year or 2023, we're going to have a bear market again. We're already having inflation, interest rate problems, which leads to economic problems. The situation in Ukraine is certainly going to have leftover economic problems for many of us. So I would be very worried about, you said you were born in 87. So,
Correct.
Okay, well, hooray. You'll be old enough for a big bear market in 2023.
Looking forward to it, Jim. Thank you. Our next question comes from Dustin, who briefly spoke to you earlier. So you did speak a lot about commodities in terms of the portfolio in which you run, and sugar being an all-time low and still value in 60%. Is gold still a viable option in your opinion?
Well, I own some gold. Yes. I had gold for many years. I've never sold any. I periodically buy it. I plan to buy more. If I were buying more precious metals today, which I'm not, but if I were, I would buy more silver than gold, because silver on a historic basis is much cheaper. I will probably buy more before this is over, but if it were today, it would be more silver. So yes, I mean, throughout history, people, when there are problems with their government or their currency or the world, they always turn to gold and silver. The politicians will say, no, forget gold and silver. You don't need it. But Stephen, I'm an old peasant, and us old peasants know that when things go wrong, we need some gold under the bed. We need some silver in the closet, because silver and gold have been around thousands of years, and most politicians have not been and will not be. So I own both, and I will buy more.
Thank you, Jim. One of our other members who you spoke to earlier also shares your last name, Peter Rogers. We have Hamilton opening up here this week. He established the USA Central Financial System. Are you a fan of Alexander Hamilton, Jim?
Well, I'm not related to Peter Rogers, nor am I related to Alexander Hamilton. But I'm sorry, what was your question about Peter or Alexander Hamilton, or both?
I'll hand it over to Peter.
Alexander Hamilton's one of my heroes, Jim, because he started off in the West Indies in a poor family and came to North America at about the same time that your family did. And he established the central financial system and established the basis between the Central American powers and the states. And I just wonder, are you a fan of the American financial system that he led on?
Well, Peter, thank you. Thank you for the question. Actually, my family got there long before Hamilton did. As I remember, he came there as a late teenager, and didn't know anybody or anything else. It was a great success story. What he did, unfortunately, he got killed in a duel later in his life. But no, the American financial system, for better or for worse, has been one of the great success stories of the last couple of 100 years. There have been plenty of problems. A couple of times the currency got terribly debased, but the US dollar has survived. Very few currencies have even survived that long without being debased horribly. We had a civil war in the US and the currency was debased during that war. But for the most part, the US dollar has been sound and has survived. And as you know, it is the world's international medium of exchange now. It is the world's reserve currency at the moment. I see that that's probably going to come to an end before long. And the reason I say that, I mentioned before that no currencies lasted over than 100 years or so, but an international medium of exchange is supposed to be neutral. Anybody can use it for anything that they want to, but unfortunately, and I am an American, so I don't like saying it, but recently the US has started, if they don't like you, they put sanctions on you and you cannot use the US dollar. Well, that's not the way an international medium of exchange is supposed to work. So many countries are now searching for something to compete with the US dollar. I mean, if you were China or Russia or India or Brazil or Iran or many places, they are saying we must prepare and have something else we can use going forward. Even friends of America are starting to say, well, wait a minute. If America ever gets angry at us, we will have a real problem. So the world is looking for something to compete with the US dollar. And I wish Mr. Hamilton was still around. Maybe he could help us solve the problem, but he's not here. The English pound used to be the world's medium of exchange. I can remember when everybody loved and worshiped the pound sterling. Those days are long, long gone. And unfortunately, the US dollar will be too. And Peter, if you can find Mr. Hamilton, maybe the two of you can tell us all what's going to replace or compete with the US dollar. If you find it, please buy it and then send me an email because I want to buy it too.
Thank you, Peter. Jim, we've got another very interesting question from Catherine Baxter in relation to what you did discuss earlier about markets now and the high level of debt. The question is, do you have a view about when we might see a bear market? From Catherine. Thank you.
Catherine, you should go join the Rotary Club. They know more than I do, for goodness sakes. A lot of smart people in the Rotary Club. I would suspect it will be later this year or next before the high, when the high comes. As I said before, in America, and I will use America because it's more neutral than Australia, and it's the largest market in the world. The American stock market's been going up for the longest in American history. The American stock market's been going up for 13 years, which has never happened. Catherine, that doesn't mean it can't go on 33 years, but it never has. So I see problems developing, inflation, interest rates, overvaluation. I mean, some stocks are unbelievably expensive. Many of the signs that happen at the end of bear markets, Catherine, at the end of bear markets, a lot of new people come into the market and they call you up and say, oh, I've discovered this wonderful thing called the stock market. And it is so much fun and you can make money and it's easy. Oh, it's so easy. They always say it's so easy and how much fun it is. Catherine, it's happening again. I've seen this rodeo before. I know how it ends. And so and SPACs. You've probably heard of SPACs. SPACs have been around for 300 years or so. Well, SPACs have a habit of coming around when markets get very, very high. So here comes SPACs again. I've seen this movie. It's not my first time at seeing this movie. And I know we're getting nearer the end. I am not smart enough to know exactly when. I told you later this year or next, but maybe, Edon, maybe it could be one of your evening meetings. You'll tell you somebody who will come and tell us when to the day. October 19th, whatever day it is, just tell us the day, okay? Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks, Jim. I'll introduce you now to Jim Orchard. He's got a few questions. One, really the modern monetary theory. So does this mean that debt may be not such a big issue? And he's got a couple of other questions as well. So I'll hand you over. Thank you.
Hi, Jim. Yeah,
that's-
look, I've heard a few commentators talk about modern monetary theory, suggesting, I'm not an economist, but I think suggesting that if debt is in the same currency as the country, that it can all be cancelled out by the Reserve Bank, so that, you know, concerns over high debt levels, you know, aren't so much of a worry.
Very good question, Jim. Thank you very, very much. Throughout history, whenever there's a problem in the world, people look around for something that will save them. There are always some theories lying around in the closet or on the bookshelf or something. You know, Mr. Marx came up with a theory that sounded wonderful. Many people loved it. Many people tried it for a few decades. I mean, nobody wants to be a Marxist anymore, but that did not prevent it taking hold and having a lot of people try it. At the moment, there's one called MMT. I call it more money today. They call it modern monetary theory. And as Jim says, don't worry, we'll just print up a lot of money and there won't be a problem. It's a wonderful theory, Jim. I have been around a long time and read a lot. I know it's not going to work, or I should say, I don't think it's going to work. And that's one reason we may have a big blow off here in the market, because central banks are almost practicing that now. In the UK and some countries, they're not saying it. Japan, they're essentially just printing money to pay the bills and pay the debt. And it feels wonderful. It's great fun. My gosh, it's good fun. But unfortunately, it has never worked. Maybe it'll work for a while. My goodness, wouldn't it be wonderful? We never have to worry again. Hallelujah. It would be wonderful, but it's not going to work. It might lead to one more blow off, but Jim, I don't see any way that it possibly can work, because there has to be confidence in the currency, confidence in the money. And most of us peasants know that if you just print it and print it and print it, eventually it's going to lead to problems. So Jim, if you don't have any silver in your closet, go get a little bit, okay? This actually happens to be Australian dollars. So I don't discriminate in my silver.
Thank you very much. Jim, you keep picking up some commodities. I feel bad. I've got some phones, but here's another, maybe something you can't physically touch, Jim, from one of our members, Austin Burley. Very interesting prospects that you have, but what do you think of cryptocurrency as a store of value, Jim? You can't pick that up, can you?
Hooray. It's a good question. Who asked the question?
Austin Burley.
Hello, Austin. Good evening. Many people I know trading cryptos, having a wonderful time. But first, Austin, I should point out to you that many cryptos have already disappeared and gone to zero. You know, there have been dozens of them that have already collapsed. Every government in the world is working on computer money, crypto money. In China, you cannot take a taxi with money. You have to have your computer money. You cannot buy an ice cream. They're way ahead of the rest of us, but everybody is working on it. Eventually, money will be crypto money or computer money, call it what you will. Governments like it. First of all, it's much cheaper for governments. It's much easier for them. They don't have to print it. They don't have to transport. More important, Austin, from a government's point of view, they know everything you do. They will call you up one day and say, Austin, you've been drinking too much tea this month. Cut back on your tea. They'll know everything, and they love that. Now, of course, don't like that at all, but that's the way they are. And in my view, when the US government, since I'm an American, says, okay, this is money now, but if you want to use that money over there, you can use that money too. Well, that's not the way governments work. They like authority, they like power, they like control, they like regulations. They don't particularly like losing control and monopoly. So I would suspect that if cryptocurrencies become successful as currency, which is what the optimists say they will, that governments will say, no, you cannot do that. You have to use our money or no money. And as long as they're just trading vehicles, Austin, hooray, who cares? They don't bother anybody, they don't hurt anybody. And if you're a good trader, some friends of mine are great traders. If you're just trading it, who cares? But if they become successful as currencies, the government is going to say no. Now, the people I know say, well, wait a minute, yeah, but we're smarter than the government. Austin, you and I both know they're smarter than the government. Everybody's smarter than the government. But the government has the guns. And if the government comes in and says it's now against the law, most of us will use something else. I don't have the guns. I'm not smarter than the government, but most people are. And I don't have any guns.
Thank you, Austin. Jim, I'm going to hand over to our President Reg, who's actually got a question in relation to what's happening at the moment between Russia and Ukraine.
Thanks very much, Stephen. And Jim, great presentation so far. Thank you. My theory goes to a book I read once. I can't remember the name of it precisely, but it was proposing that Putin, by about 2030, was going to try and have the US currency replaced as the medium of exchange internationally. And I just wondered whether you've today confirmed the idea that the US is actually doing it itself by, and you've already said that, but I just wonder about where you see the Ukraine war in this. You made the comment before you think it will be over reasonably soon. I'd just be interested in your thoughts that propel you to that conclusion, and whether the Ukraine war is part of the grander plan for a very clever strategist in Putin.
Well, I certainly cannot defend anybody invading another country. He will tell you he has sound reasons, and there are people who will explain that some of this was because of America's actions over the past few years, but it's irrelevant. The war exists, and we have to deal with it. My reasons for thinking it's not going to last too much longer. First of all, it's not doing Mr. Putin any good. Whatever he thought, it's not happening that way. And second, the markets are telling me. I mean, the price of oil is going down dramatically. The price of energy is going down. Price of gold and silver are dropping. Commodity prices are dropping. And the markets are often smarter than all of us. They look ahead to see what's coming. And oil prices are coming down sharply. And that says to me, something is going on, that this is not going to last too much longer. Uranium prices, all coal prices are all coming down. And that says to me, something is going to happen. Now, the market has been wrong before. I've been wrong many times in my life, many times. Reg, you want to hear about my first wife? I cannot tell you how many mistakes I have
Perhaps
made.
over a cheap wine in Kew.
Yeah, we'll drink wine somewhere in the country and outback, and I'll tell you some of my problems, such as my mistakes, such as my first wife. But the markets are telling me that this will come to an end before too much longer. I don't know very few people are supporting Mr. Putin in this war. But basically my answer to you is the markets are telling me it's not going to last too much longer.
Marvelous.
The markets may turn around tomorrow and oil may go to $200 a barrel. But at the moment, the markets are going the other way. Now, this will, in history though, when we look back, there were already several countries working on something to compete with the dollar. I mean, China and India and Russia and Brazil, these countries were working on finding a competitor already for political reasons. And I've told you that the US is the largest debtor nation in world history. So for political and economic reasons, countries were already looking. And this accelerates it. America has said, they've thrown Russia out of SWIFT. They said, Russia, you cannot use US dollars. Well, needless to say, many people say, wait a minute, they might do that to us too. We got to have something else in case. And so, and again, I don't like saying it, Reg, but I can see how they're thinking, and you would be too. We've got to find something else to use in case. Not going to be the Australian dollar, not going to be pound sterling. It's going to be something else, and I haven't figured it out yet. I used to think it might, I still do think it might be the Chinese renminbi someday. It's big enough, it's got a huge economy, but the Chinese renminbi is a blocked currency now. You can't buy and sell it. I mean, if I call up and want to buy and sell Australian dollars, I can. You cannot do that with the renminbi. And so it cannot be the world's reserve currency as long as it's a blocked currency.
Fantastic answer.
Wait, Reg, if you know, send me an email, okay?
You'll be the first to hear.
Hooray!
Thank you, President Reg. Jim, we've got a couple more questions, two more. One comes from Gavin. And Jim, and what we're keen to understand and what Gavin is asking, your 3 top investment ideas within this bubble market.
Well, I have learned in my life that disaster often leads to opportunities. In Asia, in fact, China, Korea, Japan, they have a word which means opportunity and disaster are the same thing. We don't have that word in English. They've been around longer than us. In China, it's wei ji. And basically, and interestingly, in Korea and Japan, it's exactly the same symbol, it's the exact same character. It's pronounced differently, obviously. But the opportunity and disaster are the same thing. I would love to be investing in Russia right now. Cannot, I cannot. I'd rather be poor and not in jail than rich and in jail. So I'm not going to be buying Russian investments soon. But that's the sort of place that I would be looking. I am watching the Chinese market, which is coming down dramatically right now. I am looking for things that have been smashed: transportation, tourism, airlines, entertainment, things that are being smacked, because I know that someday we're going to fly to New York again. We're not going to take the boat to New York. We're going to fly to New York. So I know that airlines will have a revival someday. So I'm looking at the industries that have been smashed the most. I am also looking at agriculture. Agriculture has been a disaster for decades. The average age of farmers in America is 58. In Japan, it's 66. In Australia, the average age of farmers is very, very old. More people in America study public relations than study agriculture. The highest rate of suicide in the UK is in agriculture. You all probably know that many Indian farmers have been committing suicide. Well, agriculture is not a great place. Nobody wants to be a farmer anymore. So I am looking for opportunities in agriculture, because I know if something doesn't happen, we're not going to have any clothes anymore. We're not going to have any food anymore. So they're great opportunities. I don't know. If you know how to drive a tractor, you might think of buying some property in the outback or somewhere.
Yeah, well, sorry to interrupt. Well, I also got questions based on the previous asking by Reg. And speaking of the Reg questions, they saying like some kind of currencies. What I think also probably there is an intermediate currency between the, like the US dollar and the China renminbi. Probably like what I found in my creative ideas is Hong Kong dollar. What do you think about the Hong Kong dollar? Probably is a good indicators or currency that you prefer instead of like the Chinese renminbi? Otherwise, like you mentioned previously.
Well, Gavin, I own some Hong Kong dollars, but the Hong Kong dollar is certainly not big enough to become the world's reserve currency. You know, to be the world's reserve currency, it has to be huge so that people can buy and sell all they want without distorting the market and at 5 seconds notice. I do own some Hong Kong dollars, and eventually when the Chinese currency is convertible, when it's freely tradable, I suspect the Hong Kong dollar will be merged into the Chinese currency and the Hong Kong dollar will disappear. But I own it in the meantime, but it's not going to be big enough to replace the US dollar. And I just want to make sure you all understand, I'm bullish on commodities now, but it's because I see it as the cheapest asset class. But many times in my life when I'm much more bullish on other things, you asked me about how I see the world today. Today, the cheapest asset class I see are commodities.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you, Gavin. Jim, I'm going to hand over to Peter Clements, who's looking for you to explain the mechanics of investing in commodities that you have been speaking about. Thanks, Peter.
Well, Peter, one can open an account with just about any broker. There are commodity brokers, and you can buy and sell cotton if you want to. You can buy and sell copper if you want to, fairly easily. One of the advantages of commodities, you can use great leverage. You can buy commodities only putting up 5% with many people. That can make you very rich one day. It makes you very, very poor one day too, if you get it wrong. Many studies have shown that index investing is the best for most people. Index investing outperforms active investors nearly all the time, for better or for worse. So since I'm lazy and since I know that, I buy commodity indexes. The ones I buy trade on the New York Stock Exchange. So you just call up any stockbroker. RJA is an agricultural basket. It's a basket of commodities. It's a basket of 20 commodities. So for me, it's very easy that way. And I know the studies show they outperform most people. There's one RJI, which is I own RJI as well. I try to own the indexes is a simple way to do that. If you're good at it, you can buy copper futures. There are plenty of brokers in Australia who will help you with copper futures if you know what you're doing. Just cotton futures. You can buy and sell all you want with many brokers in Australia. Just be very, very, very careful. And I just want to, for a second here, go back a bit. Another reason that commodities are, in my view, going to be strong, many changes that are taking place in the world lead to more demand for commodities. Electric cars. Apparently, we're all going to have electric cars someday. Well, an electric car uses several times more copper than a petrol car. If you think about it, you can figure out why, because it's got a lot of electricity. So electric cars use more lead, more copper, lots of things. So there are demand, and by the way, very few people have opened a copper mine in a long, long time. So the supply is not great and the demand continues to grow. So there are many reasons, in my view, that commodities are a good place to be now. But if you don't know anything about commodities, please do not invest in commodities. Just stay with what you know.
Thank you for that, Peter, and thank you, Jim. I'm just going to hand over now to the one last discussion with Austin again, just in relation to your strong beliefs on commodities. So Austin, can you jump back on and further explain your question to Jim? Thank you.
Sure. Yes. Thanks, David. Yes, Jim, you've got a strong belief in commodities, and I just presented if gold and silver as an example, the metal itself doesn't generate income. but will potentially have holding costs. And this is, if that's correct, that sort of investment is relying on capital gains when and you need to realise it if you don't have other income sources. So I just my question in fact relates a bit to the one you've just answered in terms of how do you invest in these commodities. I'd just like you to comment on the fact that the commodity itself doesn't generate an income, but it has, so you would be relying on the selling of the asset.
Well, there's no question that copper does not provide any income. I mean, you could own shares in a copper company, which might pay dividends, but be sure you get the right copper company. There was a famous American writer once who said that the definition of a gold mine, he could have said copper, he said the definition of a gold mine is a hole in the ground with a liar standing at the top. He had run into lots of mine. I'm sure you have in Australia, my goodness. You know, there are lots of hustlers in commodities and in mining everywhere in the world. So be sure you have the right mine. And if you do, they will pay you dividends.
Yeah, so it's all about the shares in the actual owners of the commodities. And of course, you may have heard of the Poseidon boom here back in the 1960s, when the value of that particular investment shot up to $200, which was astronomical in that day, and there hadn't been anything mined at that point.
I can remember some great mining stories in Australia. There were times in the 70s I had to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning to speak to the Australian brokers about Australian mining stocks. And I wasn't around in the 50s, at least I wasn't investing in the 50s, but sure, there have always been fantastic mining stories coming out of Australia and everywhere else. Just be sure you have the right company. If you're the beauty of copper is it's very simple. It's the same all over the world. Copper companies can be very, very, very different. But Austin, you made a point. I want to tell you, when I first went to Wall Street, I remember people would say things like, older people say, well, I cannot really sell it because I'd have a huge tax problem.
Yes.
Also, I remember I used to say to myself, I hope I have a tax problem someday. I wanted a tax problem. I aspired to a tax problem. The bigger the problem, the better. So
exactly,
it's a good problem to have, Austin, that you have to pay taxes because you're successful.
Thank you very much for that. That now concludes our Q&A. Thank you very much, Jim. I'll now just hand it back over to our MC, Dustin, to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. That was lovely. I can't remember the last time we had such an engaging Q&A session in an evening meeting. So thank you, Jim. As a token of appreciation, you will be getting our limited edition Rotary socks, which is actually made right here locally in Melbourne. So which will be posted to you very soon. Now I'm going to hand it over to President Reg for the general notices and for the closing. Over to you, Reg.
Thanks so much, Dasun, and Jim, thank you. I think you've given us the sort of message we've all, I think, instinctively understood. Might be ahead of things, the amount of money being spent, the size of various bubbles. And by the way, I think real estate here is going through pretty much the same sort of bubble. Just doesn't seem to want to stop, and that must be because there's a lot of money around. But we really, I think I speak for everyone by saying a big thank you to you, Jim. You've given us a very well-founded presentation, and it gives us some foresight to be able to maybe plan for that a bit more effectively. So thank you, and I'd like now to just pass on to everyone a few notices. The first, I'd like to inform members of is just some news about our beloved president-elect for the next Rotary year, Beverly Brock. She's had to have urgent surgery last week to fix some issues identified in tests a few days earlier. She is okay, but still feeling pretty crook, and but on a recovery path, recuperating in hospital. Together with her close friends, I've spoken to Bev and passed on our very best wishes, and asked her to put her mind at rest that we will get on with things in her absence, but hopefully be ready to engage with her when she arrives back on deck. The second thing I wanted to just flag is that we've got another architectural walk. This is our first physical architectural walk for at least 2.5 years. The places on this annual fun activity are limited, but you can join club members and partners and friends on a walking tour of some amazingly interesting historic areas around the famous Shrine of Remembrance that one of our founding members, Sir John Monash, was so close to helping to promote and get put in that location. The guided tour is organised by a club architect, Bob Urondes. Bookings is vital via Humanitics, and you can see the details of it in the club's bulletin for this week. So it's now my duty to draw the meeting to a close, and in closing, I'd like to thank our chair for the day, Stephen Rando. Stephen, another accomplished Q&A session, and thank you for your effort, but also to our other members of our evening team who've been closely involved in organising the evening meetings. Firstly, Dasun, for your emceeing, and to Yidan for so nicely introducing your friend Jim, and George, who with Yidan leads the team. Thank you all. Great job. And my final thing is to say a reminder, our monthly evening meetings will continue every second Wednesday of the month. At this stage, we're planning to run our next meeting on the 13th of April. It'll be an in-person opportunity, and our speaker will be Sandy Hood, who's the owner of a fashion company that he's established himself, and a former SAS member who served in Afghanistan. We'll be announcing the venue, which will be a convivial setting, with other details shortly. And Sandy's going to discuss how he managed the difficult transition from the military to civilian employment, and which is a challenge similar to that which many of us have faced from time to time in our lives. For this, bookings will be essential via Humanitics. And our next lunchtime meeting, which is next Wednesday, will be at level 35 at the Sofitel, and there will be both in-person participation and Zoom capacity to view it as well. Our guest speaker is Emma Germano, who's the president of the Victorian Farmers Federation, speaking on rural and agricultural Australia after the pandemic. Bookings again via Humanitics are essential, and I'm certainly hoping you can join us for that. So finally, thank you everyone who has joined us here tonight. It's been a good attendance. Thank you. And to Jim, thank you again for your great presentation. As we say goodbye, everyone, do stay safe. I'd like to play a relevant piece by a band which we probably all know and maybe remember, called ABBA, performing Money, Money, Money. And thank you again, everyone. Have a great week. All the best.